Hi, welcome to the stream. I'm Lauren. I'm a tech writer here.
And my name's Ryan Brucks. I'm a senior environment artist.
My name is Josh Markiewicz, and I'm an online programmer.
I'm Max Preussner. I'm on the tools team, working on engine stuff.
So this is going to be sort of a focus on programming, but we're going to also go to the news, the community spotlight, and some of Ryan's cool flipbook stuff. So we'll start with the news. If you want to pull up the a lot of the news from E3, we're going to start with the Fable Legends, which is from Lionhead, and the light propagation blog post. Yeah, they wrote the whole thing about as they were working on it, and some of the pictures of before and after.
So for those who don't know what that is, light propagation volumes is kind of like a dynamic global illumination solution that we have a version of working in-house, but it's still in beta, as Lauren already mentioned. But that doesn't stop people from figuring out how to use it, of course.
The next one is Scalebound, which is an Xbox One exclusive by Platinum Games. And I was watching the Microsoft keynote, and this just came on, and it's freaking awesome when the dragon just pops up.
Is this all in-game, or?
Actually, not sure about if it's game footage or the trailer, but
Could be.
it's pretty awesome.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And then the last one we have from the Microsoft keynote was Crackdown. So this is going to be with Unreal Engine 4, and
Oh, they're making noise. Just X them.
very helpful, the little thing showing them.
Is that good?
Yeah. If you want to maximize this at all, yeah.
There's the full screen button over here.
Hiding.
We might have disabled it.
I'm not sure if we can. Well,
Zoom in, yay.
Cheating.
Oh, there you go.
get back to where we were.
The villain player in Fable Legends brings a whole new
There's another one, just like the art and the soundtrack and everything is just awesome.
Yeah, it's really impressive to watch the whole thing if you've got time.
Yeah.
Go ahead and jump ahead then.
Oh yeah, you want to go to the PlayStation? So one of the first games from the PlayStation briefing was Dead Island 2, which is being done by. He just wants to leave all the tabs open.
Paused it.
So this is pre-rendered, but it is Unreal Engine 4, and so.
How does our story end?
That's you, Josh.
I like this trailer. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I like the number of funny trailers this time.
The idea of being in denial with zombieism.
Yeah.
Don't give
It's like
it
I
away
can
yet.
work out and overcome this.
Yeah. It's kind of.
Starts out a lot like Zombie Land, and then, find out.
All of a sudden, oh no, terrible things are happening. Yeah, just jump ahead to this a little bit.
He's oblivious, of course.
Yeah, so well, I mean, you got the headphones in.
I don't know how a zombie could possibly manage the roller skates.
Barry goes shambling on roller skates.
Shambling skates. It's pretty gross, actually.
That is a little grody.
It's a pretty aggressive virus.
That bubble there is pretty gnarly.
Oh yeah, there she goes. She's not doing the roller skates too well.
All right, very cool.
Yeah. I'm close that
Yeah, I'm
one.
gonna close this so I don't get any more looks. All right. And
Oh,
then
so Abzu is by Unreal Engine 4, and it's by Giant Squid, and this has got sort of a really awesome artistic style in terms of very calm and peaceful and under the sea. Yeah. It's like Giant Squid presents the underwater game.
It's always amazing to see what people do with the engine.
Yeah.
I always
Yeah.
wonder, like, damn, how did they do that?
Nice use of vertex shaders, it looks like, on some of the foliage.
I just like, the rays coming through the water and all of that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Very nice.
Yeah. It's almost like just a little bit stylized, right? Like not.
Yeah, some of these shots really look like drawings or hand paintings, which is impressive.
Yeah.
It's not always an easy thing to pull off.
This next one I'm excited about because I'm a big fan of fighting games. So this is the Mortal Kombat X gameplay trailer, which is on Unreal Engine 3. It's gonna. This is one of the first fighting games, Mortal Kombat, that I played growing up. So it's cool to see another iteration of it.
Definitely has a very cinematic feeling to it.
Yeah.
Throw your own ice statue at somebody? It's new.
Yeah. No, I love fighting games, so I'm looking forward to this one.
I mean, they're keeping 60 frames, right? So 60 FPS game would be fighting game. Pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty good for that
Yeah.
one, I think.
If you skip too far ahead, it's the whole finish him and
Yeah.
very gruesome. And then we've got the some more trailers from Batman Arkham Knight, which is also on Unreal Engine 3. I don't know if this is the trailer, but I was watching the one with the Batmobile battle mode. It just pops like a turret out of the top of the Batmobile and is shooting as he's driving through the streets.
Oh, that's cool.
So this looks like just that sort of story trailer.
The last will and testament of the deceased, Thomas Wayne. In the event of my death, I hereby declare that all my worldly possessions pass to my son, Bruce Wayne. Bruce, I ask that you honor the Wayne family legacy.
Definitely excited to see. I don't know if you guys have played the ones before.
I played the first one a little bit.
For the first two.
Actually, I remember a couple of the Rocksteady guys actually came out here for some optimization tips toward the end of the first Arkham Asylum, which was pretty cool to see that in progress.
Yeah,
Destined for great things.
definitely looking forward to it.
Make the most of your opportunities. Use them to give back to the city that has given us so much. To change the lives of millions of people.
Here we go.
Do not be frivolous with this wealth. Please do not waste it all on fast cars.
I want that car.
See that parked in the parking lot outside?
Destructive lifestyle.
See the E3.
Invest in Gotham. Treat its people like family. Watch over them and use this money to safeguard them from forces beyond their control. My deepest regret is I will not see you grow into the good man I know you will become. And finally, my son, I ask that you never abandon this city to fate. We have lived through dark days, and no doubt there are more to come. But it is the good and great
You
men
want to go to
who
some of
stand
the
up
community
for
spotlight stuff?
when
Okay.
others turn and run.
It's a good trailer though.
Close this one down.
Yes. So this is stuff that we've pulled out of forum threads this week. Really cool content and plugins from people. So this is Crystal Myth, which was done for a game jam where the theme was Beneath the Surface. So you wanna probably make that one full screen from the corner there.
Just, just go to YouTube and then do it.
Yeah. So it's like almost just a really peaceful feel walking through, and the crystals that light up. It's done in, I think, 72 hours. And we can actually hear it on this end, but it's got a really cool like orchestral soundtrack. So. See, it's like you want to line up the art there on the ground.
Right. So a lot of cool little puzzles to get through.
Yeah. It's definitely awesome. It's always fun to see the results of game jams, like how much gets done in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, that's very cool. So different levers control different rings.
Yeah.
And stuff. Cool.
Did a good job of the whole atmosphere.
Yeah, the whole cartoony style is kind of working for it here with the silhouette and the lighting and everything. It's nice.
Yeah. And this is actually just them recording the
Wow.
clip of them recording the music for it.
That's awesome.
So
So these are the same guys who actually worked on the demo, or was this some guys that they worked with?
yeah, I guess they've got all the team members listed, but some on the gameplay, some on the music, and it's just really cool to see the behind the scenes this way too.
Yeah, it's not something you see often. Very cool.
Yeah.
Go ahead and jump ahead to the next one then.
Yeah, which is the JSON query plugin. So it's a plugin that lets you communicate just with servers, just with Blueprint nodes. So just a plugin that way. And Max, did you take a look at this one at all?
Just briefly, yeah. It looks very cool, though. You can talk to backend servers with just blueprints.
All right, awesome.
Yeah. We also have another plugin, which is this VA Ocean.
Let's see, do they have the video here?
The videos, I think, are in the next two tabs if you want to take a
You're
look
right.
at.
Great. This one actually impressed me so much I went to go install it just before coming onto the stream earlier. I didn't quite get it fully installed yet since I ran out of time, but I'm definitely looking forward to messing with this one because it's almost like a realistic shader, and I think he's doing fast Fourier transforms to make this possible, which is not necessarily an easy thing to do in the material editor, but so that's pretty impressive.
Yep, fast Fourier transforms. And the wireframe one is even crazier to me.
Yeah,
which I
that's
think's
the
in
next video.
Tab.
Yes.
Just to see that broken down that way.
Yeah, the waves actually look alive as opposed to, just sort of oscillating, which is the cheap and easy way of doing fake waves in games. So something people should look at if they want to see how realistic ocean shaders are constructed.
Yeah.
Very cool. Almost like you can see the wind and kind of feel it.
Just blowing across there.
Yeah. That's great.
The next one is a little cinematic by the distiller who also did the Assassin's Creed Ballroom.
Sure.
And he was a beta user previously, so this is his
Zoom in
cinematic
video.
with the whole epic music behind it.
Build up.
Yeah.
That was cool.
Yeah. Not all the cinematics that he's done have just been totally different art styles, but also just really awesome looking.
So the adventure kit.
So the adventure kit was originally, I guess, a UDK project, but it's being, they're porting it over to UE4, and its functionality like, so climbing those poles there in the background or running through tight spaces, so a lot of movement and camera controls for sort of making a utility pack for adventure style games. So here's going to climb this, and the camera changes, and he's got that movement style. There's like, I think, 8 or so different videos of everything from balance beams to ledge, like climbing up ledges and stuff like that. So
It's almost like one of our starter projects, isn't it?
Yeah.
Getting people started on different techniques. That's cool.
it is really cool. It's been fun to see it like grow and develop. I mean, obviously it's a port, but adding more stuff in that you can do in UE4 and stuff like that.
No, that's great because that's one of the things I see a lot on the forums is people asking how to do things like climbing on ledges, and usually there's a million ways you can do it. So just
Yeah.
seeing some examples is a great way to get started.
Yeah, he's just climbing on the wall there. So
The camera control is not a very easy thing to do, with collision and making sure you frame things right so that you
yeah,
can...
making sure the camera doesn't go through things, stuff like that.
That's right.
And I kind of like that this is a kit that's focused on the mechanics kind of thing.
Some sort of
'cause-
balance beam mechanic
Yeah.
going on here. That's cool.
Yeah, this will be super useful to people, for people to get started quickly.
Yeah, for sure.
Very nice.
And another setup thing that we get asked a lot is the time of day setup, how to do that. And so a couple of community members have taken a project and basically gotten it all integrated into a tutorial on the wiki.
We're on page 2 here.
So you can actually, download I think this is mostly just, you can download the blueprint or go read the tutorial on the wiki of how to get it set up. But it's been really interesting to see everybody come together and sort of tweak the different features of the time of day setup. So, how to drive your son based on I want my day to be this long, that kind of thing. So,
That's awesome.
yeah.
Very cool. So I think we finished up the community spotlight stuff. So
Yeah, you wanna-
go ahead and jump into the blueprint stuff.
Yes.
All right. So something I've been working on for a couple of weeks, we have something at Epic here called Free Friday projects, which is a day where you don't have to necessarily work on the project you're assigned to. You can do kind of a side project. And this is one I've been working on kind of for a long time, actually building on it. And it's kind of a semi-procedural material builder where you can set up a brick material by specifying offsets and things like that. And I added some controls for things like grout thickness, the corner radius, bevel, softness, and a bunch of things like that. And this is just kind of a little video to show some of the different styles that are possible. So on this example here, this is actually blending between different material instances using the interpolate material instance dynamic function in Blueprints, just because there's so many settings being changed between those different instances that it would have been kind of hard to demo that on an individual basis. And these are just a couple of the examples, and some of these are actually the textures that are included in the starter content pack. Like you can see here, one of the ones that has a lot of the bump offset using a Shane Cottle's cool function. And this is how I actually baked these materials to simple textures out of the editor. So you can actually use this tool now and export textures straight out of the editor that tile, including diffuse, ambient occlusion, normal map, and all that. And the reason being obviously to optimize down all the expensive instructions to make that procedural possible. And there's a few other things that are capable as part of that same sort of tool. It uses the high-res screenshot command. And so I kind of made a new blueprint under a new engine folder called Art Tools, and it's called the Render to Texture Tools. And this version here is showing how it can be used to capture a 3D sprite imposter. And so I'm using as an example the little material sphere example guy. So I baked out the textures. It captured basically the little mesh as a screenshot from every possible angle. And then here's a little example set. So this wouldn't be a perfect technique in all cases because you see some popping and you lose a lot of resolution doing this. But all of these guys, except for one, are actually just a 2D sprite. And they're still lit as the same as regular objects in the scene are. So it's kind of hard to tell based on moving the light which one is fake. As I get closer, you see more and more popping. You can see that that guy up close is actually the sprite. And that's the one real mesh in the scene there. So it's going to jump ahead now to a slightly different version of that same tool, where in this option for the 3D imposter sprites, there's an option called a single rotation axis as opposed to full 3D. And what that does is it captures a billboard in kind of like a 360 view around the object. And so this was a kind of a test more for Fortnite, where one rock mesh was rendered out using that billboard technique. So you can actually go around the mesh and it looks kind of like a real 3D mesh, even though that's actually just a 2D sprite there. And you can do things like randomly rotate the sprite so that you can get different positions. So it can be a way to get a lot of mileage out of one asset for one, or to just support dynamic lighting with a sprite. Okay. And this is just this is kind of a little simple thing you can do with that same blueprint, which is you can do something like the world align texture material function, and you can actually bake that down to the composite material by unwrapping using a vertex shader. So you specify the mesh from the scene you want to unwrap, and it goes ahead and does the unwrap when you check the box. And you go through the same process of selecting what things that you want to export. So in this case, base color and normal map. And you go through the same process to render textures, and it will go ahead and put those into your screenshots directory. So you've got your different buffers that were selected there.
Ryan, you're getting a lot of oohs and ahs in the chat.
You didn't do this in one day, did you?
No, this was actually 3 or 4 free Fridays, and plus I worked on it on weekends whenever I'm bored. So this is a different technique that was kind of made with mobile in mind, which is to capture out a normalized depth map of an object. So what it's doing here is it kind of centers the object within its own bounding sphere so that you can get a reliable depth value inside of those bounds. And then you can project that onto the mesh inside of a material function. And that you can actually use an unlit shader to kind of mimic the effect of dynamic lighting. And so there's a couple different reasons you might want to do that. For one is if you were to unwrap that with unique UVs, you'd lose about 3 times resolution because of the UVs having to spread out due to the polygons overlapping. So here you can see that, that depth texture being applied. So from the top you see it kind of lines up. And what it's basically doing there is sort of reconstructing its own sort of bounds and then compares those depths just like a traditional dynamic shadow pass would. And you have control for things like the offset value, which is really there just to remove artifacts. And let's skip ahead a teeny bit. So here I'm just changing the subsurface color, which is something you can pretty much do in any material. And here I'm changing the opacity, which is kind of like how far it allows it to be different from the depth that it's returned before it reaches blackness. So you can kind of get things like the appearance of light transmission through the mesh. And in this case, the mesh is being, the texture is being projected in world coordinates. And so it's purposefully set not to pick up on the mesh's wind. And what that kind of does is it makes it look as if the shadow is dynamic, when it's really just it's happening because the shadow projection is not moving, but the mesh is moving. And you can also do things like move it the opposite amount as the wind of the mesh. And there's a couple other things you can do. The obvious downside of this is that you bake the light for a specific angle for that mesh, for a specific lighting direction. But here's an option where you can sort of fake rotate that just to make it look like the light is from a different rotation, even though it would be ideal to capture it from that exact angle. And we showed this one last week, but I'm just going to go ahead and play it again, which is another modification on that same blueprint, which is capturing out a flipbook animation. And you can see it's kind of using the same, everything in here kind of does the same basic operation, which is, repeat a mesh and do a whole bunch of rotations and capture those rotations. So here is a flipbook where you specify your starting rotation, and you get to tell it how many rotations on each axis you want it to perform. So it'll always go back, and the first and last frame will always match, and it will just do everything in between. And so when you simulate, you get a little preview mesh guy here. It doesn't match exactly the animation you get yet. There's some work still to be done there. But like the other ones, once you're happy with how it looks, you export it straight out of the editor. You re-import it and use the flipbook material function, which is pretty straightforward to use. And there's a couple examples here.
Oh, that's cool. So you just run it through the material function. It'll take care of picking the right images.
So these guys are just 3 little examples. We use these on the Zen Apple demo.
So it's like literally one quad.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then this is the same thing, but used to capture out an actual animation. So this was a bird that was made by one of our artists, Joshua Marlowe, for Zen. And the animation on this bird was actually done in the material editor by Nick Donaldson, entirely using vertex shader. So he's doing something like a rotate about axis for the wing of the bird, and telling it which axis to rotate and things like that. And there's a little bob in there as well. So I basically went into his material and replaced the time node with an animation phase scalar parameter. And so each frame in the cell just increments through that animation phase. So what you can do is capture the animation that was done by the other artist. And then basically we have little flipbooks being made right inside the editor. So the bird is both animated and captured inside the editor, which I think is pretty interesting. So there you can kind of, it's obvious which one is the sprite at this angle, but I think at the starting angle it was kind of hard to tell. Maybe in case we make 3D Flappy Bird, we've already got some art assets now, so
There you go.
that's cool.
It's very cool.
But,
That
yeah,
always
so,
blows my mind a little bit that your brain sort of fills in and doesn't expect that it's actually just a flat image being shown.
yeah, due to the blending and stuff. But yeah, so that's all stuff that's possible entirely with the blueprint system, which is awesome that you can do that nowadays. So that's it for me for right now. So I guess the next thing would be Max with the math, or is it you, Josh?
Sorry, no, back to
Back
Lauren
to
real
me.
quick.
Back to Lauren.
Yes. Okay. So, yes, I'm a tech writer, and a lot of what I focus on is working on programming and also the blueprints and sort of the gameplay side of stuff. And one thing that I've been working on is this tutorial video series. So we're going to make a sort of mini game where there's a character and he's got a power level and he loses a little power every frame, but he can collect batteries and power back up. So cover, how to compile, how to set up your classes and functions, but also a little bit about how to start coding a Blueprint API, because we've gotten a lot of questions about that. How do I make a new node? How do I set something up in code that I can then go call in a Blueprint, or how can I set up behavior in a Blueprint that I can call in code? And so that would be the whole video series, but I'm also putting a lot of those examples back into the written docs. And so there'll be tips and tricks of working on projects and when you need to do the full recompile and when you can just sort of tweak a variable and compile within the editor, stuff like that. So, yeah.
Those are very cool. I actually watched the first sequence of them, which is cool. And I got comfortable enough to install Visual Studio and kind of stumble my way around some of the files and make one super minor change. Nothing really worth mentioning here, but just the fact that I was able to watch those videos, install Visual Studio, and build a project, that's something that I wouldn't have actually tried to do without the video. So kudos to you guys for setting that up.
Thanks. Yeah, Jeff Ferris also had an intro programming video.
I watched that one also.
Yeah.
That's great.
Putting programmers out of a job.
No, don't worry.
And tutorial videos.
They don't want me actually checking in any code. It was more like make
They
sure
will always need
Job
programmers.
security. Job security.
They will always need programmers to fix all the bugs.
Yes, exactly.
But maybe we should point out that exposing C++ classes to blueprints is actually pretty easy.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be a C++ wizard to do that.
Yeah, you just have the little ufunction macro, and so there's keywords that you put in, and so there's things like if you just want to make a node that's going to change something about your inputs, then you make it blueprint callable. But if it's just a simple math node or something like that, then you can make it blueprint pure, and it's the same. You just will basically automatically get a node with that same function name and inputs when you recompile and reload the editor. So, and then we've also got blueprint implementable and blueprint native events, which let you set up in code, I'm going to call the power up function, but you leave it up to the person making the blueprints what actually happens when you power up. So we actually tried to cover that a little bit in the video series. I put together some of the code end, and then Zach comes in and sets up the blueprints of, driving the material or doing some particle system. So you can see how, say programmers and artists would work together on a shared project like that.
I think the trade-offs come down to really understanding the architecture as a whole, so you can be able to answer the questions of like, what do I want to make a blueprint? When do I want to go native? I mean, obviously, native C++ is going to be faster than say an interpreted blueprint thing. But sometimes the iteration time, like a programmer can say, I know that every time I jump, I'm going to signal this event, and then let an LD, a level designer, or an artist say, do all the particle flare and sound flare and maybe even other more advanced things, and just say, I'm going to call this function, I don't care what it does, but every time I jump, you hook in right here and you go. And then the other way is like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I know that, I'm going to call this, they're going to call my function, and like, I don't care when they use it, but you want to do a line trace or you want to figure something out, you just call my function and do it. I think it just comes with time and experience to be able to figure that out.
Yeah, I know that if you're doing a lot of calculations, we do have like the math expression node coming in a future release, but for some other things, it's easier to move something that would be a lot of nodes into, say, a couple lines of code. But when you do have sort of little tweaks, or if you want to use a timeline, so to have a curve to drive stuff, then that makes more sense to do in blueprints. I think in my videos, I've got an example where it just takes your volume and picks a random point in it, and that's in code, but I made it a blueprint node, so anybody could just take that and always pick a random point in their box component later on.
Rapid prototyping in blueprints is key. You have a lot of real creative and intelligent, level designers and artists that can go off and do this stuff. And then after you have settled on a prototype or something that's fun, if it's not performant, you can always bring it back into the C++ land.
Yeah.
So we did.
Users often ask, should I build my game in blueprints or should I build it in C++? Which one is better? You should really be using both, and rapidly prototype in blueprints. And if you run into performance problems, you just convert it to C++ later if you need to, or you find someone who can do it for you.
And I know a lot of our templates do this too. They'll make the base character, base character in code, but then make a blueprint so you can set the asset references, right? So you don't have to worry about those changing and not hard coding your asset reference, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and a lot of the things that I do as an environment artist and blueprint person is work with programmers. Like something, and a good example is the hex map in Fortnite, where those meshes and the algorithm for determining which neighbors are what is all done in code. But the programmer who set that up, Joel Krabel, he actually communicated all those variables to the material instance dynamic that is inside that mesh. So I can actually access that material instance dynamic inside the blueprint and use that as a way to kind of pass out code parameters, and didn't even have to ask him to pass it in a more generic way. So you can kind of reuse and kind of team up and solve a problem in a lot of different ways, which is kind of cool. So
Yeah. See, the whole should I use C++ or blueprints, it'll probably depend on, your team and what you're more comfortable with. And
yeah.
I mean, I think one of the simplest ways you can start out with it, this is coming from someone who's not super experienced with blueprints, but I think back to UE3 and like the archetype system. Like if you really just have a bunch of properties that you don't care as the programmer what they are, like what particle system am I using, what sound am I playing, what, how many of this or what mesh am I using, you really just set up this archetype and you just say, I'm assuming that all these variables are going to be set by the artist or by a level designer, and I'm just going to grab the particle system and play it for you. I'm going to grab a sound and play it for you when it's appropriate. And then the content is you can iterate on that without recompiling. You can figure it out, and mess around with it in the editor, and there's no programmer involvement at all.
Right. So like the scorekeeping system might all be in code, right? Because you have your game mode keep track of when I hit, a high score, I win. But as far as what points things are worth or what that high score is, that can all be done on the blueprint side even.
Sure.
So, yeah. So I finished recording yesterday, but we've got to do some nice video processing and stuff on them. So, but they'll be out soon, hopefully.
So you're gonna learn all the tricks from the pros. I don't use blueprints much either. I mostly use C++ because I'm on the engine team. UE4 has been out for a while now. It's been a few months, and most of you had a chance to look at the coding side of things as well. We're getting a lot of questions now about how to write code and how to do this and how to do that. Common topics are Unreal Build Tool, plugins. Since I'm here today, I'm going to try and answer as many of those questions as possible. I guess the biggest change for a lot of programmers who've worked on other game engines or who are just starting to work with Unreal is our build tool that we're using to compile the game and the editor and also standalone applications. One question we often get is like, what is Unreal Build Tool? How does it work? What does it do? Unreal Build Tool, which we just call UBT internally, is actually the heart of our whole build process. If you work on Windows and you work in Visual Studio, you will be surprised to hear that the Visual Studio solution file and your Visual Studio projects, they don't actually mean anything. UBT doesn't use those. They're just for you so you can organize your project in your integrated development environment. And the same is true for Xcode. We did this because we want to be able to build our engine and our games on many different platforms with many different tools. Linux support will be coming online soon, so that will be yet another platform we support. So we can't really rely on having just one way to structure our game solution and project files. So UBT is really the technology that drives the whole build process, and it basically looks at everything that's in your project, including the engine code and your game code, and it parses the files. It searches for your uproject file. It'll look for target.cs files. It'll look for build.cs files. And with all these files, it'll build a dependency graph to figure out what it needs to do. And once it understands what all the dependencies are between all the different modules, it'll construct an action graph. And then this action graph will be executed. And that's how things are built. If you're interested, you can actually export the graphs that UBT produces. There's a command line. Maybe, Ryan, we can bring that up real quick. If you run UBT from the command line by hand, and you pass it the -graph parameter, it'll actually export graph data that you can then use to visualize the dependencies. And we ran it here over an older data set for our entire code base, and we're just showing it in a web-based graph visualizer. And if you, can you zoom out a little, Ryan?
Yep.
So these are all the files that we have in the engine right now. Every little dot represents a CPP or a header file, and you can see how some of them kind of cluster. Other areas look kind of messy. The messy parts are mostly legacy code from UE3, and then the more nicely organized parts are the things we've already refactored and new features we've added. You see there's like this...
You can always pick out slate, right? Because it's sort of in
Yeah.
the center of the circle there.
There's that pretty ring nebula. That's actually Slate, and this data set is a little older. We recently broke up Slate into two modules, Slate and Slate Core. So if you run this over a recent code drop, you will probably get two of these ring nebulas instead of one. So this is, it looks kind of like the beautiful universe of Unreal Engine 4.
We need more colors in there. Magenta and yellow.
Yeah.
I think one
So
is header and one
also,
is source.
you can see there are a lot of parts here. There are so many files. Next time you wonder why is it taking so damn long to compile, this is part of the reason, right? Now UBT won't do all the work every single time. It's smart enough to cache things and figure out what has changed. You had a question?
Well, no, I was going to say another way to visualize, or it's not as pretty, but when UBT runs, it does drop that xgtasks.xml file deep in your intermediate directory structure, and you can open that. It basically shows like the dependency of what it determined, what things are going to be compiled and how they're going to link in the order, what action depends on what action. I've used it a couple times to just kind of look at command line arguments, like make sure that all my include directories are there, or if I add a new compiler option or something preprocessor defined, just to make sure that it's in there. I mean, it's more advanced, I guess, but it is another way to kind of visualize what UBT is up to, because as you said, it's completely, Visual Studio is merely a front, and it's all batch file and C# stuff doing the magic there. So.
Right.
What does this movement exactly represent, Max, when we double click here and these guys all start to sort of ambiently move? Is that just an animation?
If you go to the first tab, you see it starts out like this, where everything is kind of like messy, and it uses a spring system to figure out which nodes should be closer to each other, so it minimizes overlap between the different connections. Each of the lines, when we stop this, each of the lines will be basically a dependency between the files. This takes a while to run, so we just had it open in a second window to show you what it looks like when it's finished.
It's trying to reach a steady state there.
Right.
So you can see it's sort of becoming like that, I guess.
Yeah, at some point it might look entirely different. It really depends how long you let it run and with what start values it's starting out. So it's a pretty neat way of looking at the Unreal Engine code base.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what UBT does, our build tool. And people often wonder, well, what should my daily workflow look like? How should I be building my projects? Should I be recompiling the engine every single time, or how does that work? So the answer to that is UBT should be smart enough to figure out which modules it needs to compile, like only the ones that have changed, and anything that depends on those modified modules. So we really want to enable you to rapidly iterate over the modules that you're working on. So you don't have to recompile the whole engine every single time. You should only be rebuilding the things that actually changed.
I mean, there's a whole philosophy there about include what you use versus, including all the header files and what precompiled headers should include. I mean, those are topics onto themselves. And as I was talking yesterday, I mean, I've asked 6 or 7 different programmers, what do you do for PCHs? And I get 6 or 7 different answers. So some people are like, I only put in external dependencies. Some people are like, I put everything in my module because my module is small. But it all comes down to, like, are you building for, a whole build, or are you building for incremental build steps? And as a programmer who works daily, I'm obviously tending towards trying to make this small changes cause small recompiles. And so it does come down to, how you include your headers, where you where you put your headers and the dependencies that are there. And sometimes, especially in game development, I think, there are certain classes that, well, everything just needs, right? Like
Right.
everyone needs to see the pawn, everyone needs to see the game mode or the player state, and you just can't get away from that. And it's not an intractable problem, but it certainly is one we fight with all the time, one we're actively, right now, even trying to work on. So I guess another answer is that, like the engine, we're trying to separate our headers, we're trying to make them more granular, make them more modular, and so it's an ongoing thing. We're eating our own pudding here, whatever that phrase is. Our build times can be bad too, and we share the problem, and we want to make sure that we fix it as well.
Yeah, and I noticed as I was going through the tutorial, the wizard in the editor basically sort of pushes you towards the include what you use. It'll, include your new class header and your source file. But if you did want to reuse a class fairly often, I could see how I'd start to move things into the class's header.
Well, yeah, I mean, you put it in the PCH, and you're like, well, great, I'm only going to compile this once, and it's going to benefit everybody. But then the problem is that you make a change to the player controller or something like that, and you affect everybody.
Yeah.
So it's a double-edged sword. I don't think there's a one right answer. I mean, there's certainly different camps on it, but it's an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
It really depends. I think we have maybe like two main camps, like the include what you need camp and then the include everything camp. But neither approach is going to work in all cases. It depends on a lot of factors. Most importantly, the size of your module. How many CPP files do you have in your module? Does every single CPP file use all of the private headers that you have in your module? In that case, it may make sense to put everything in a PCH. If that's not the case, then it might be better to just include what you need. Personally, I structure my module just with PCHs. I throw everything into the PCH, except when there's like a header that only is used by one file. But other people prefer the opposite approach, so there's no golden rule. It really depends. And there's also iteration time versus overall build time, and they're kind of, I don't want to say they're excluding each other, but they're competing with each other. Changes that you make to your project that increase the iteration time may increase the overall build time, and vice versa. And depending on which stage of the project you're in, one or the other may be more important. So it's something you have to play around with and see what works best. We already spoke about compile times. Now, obviously, compile time is not so bad for us here because we all compile on like a network of 100 machines with 32 cores each. That is not the case.
It's still pretty bad. It can be bad. So let's not say it's bad. We're eating our own. Like I said, we're eating our own meal here. Whatever that phrase is.
Yeah. So are there any plans to improve compile times? And yes, definitely. And we've been actively working on it for several months now. And unfortunately, this is something that we can't improve by just fixing one little thing in the engine. It's more like death by 1,000 paper cuts, where we have to tweak many little gears in the system to get improved results. And the 4.2 release that just came out actually included some great improvements already for build times, and there are going to be more improvements in the next release and the releases thereafter. The framework team is currently in the process of cleaning up our game framework, a lot of the engine code, just to reduce the number of header dependencies.
We pulled out the AI module, for example. So I mean, making your game, it may seem like your game module only needs to be the game module, but if you can come up with good abstractions and good ways to separate things, I mean, it can only help in your development cycle, right? Being able to pull out AI from the engine, I mean, if that's 10 files or if that's 20 files or even if it's 100 files, it's less that you're building, on the engine dependency level. And I mean, obviously, you have to you write your code a certain way to be able to do these abstractions with interfaces, or be able to work that way. But if you can, there's nothing wrong with breaking up your game code into different pieces and allow your AI guys over here, and maybe your your game rule guys over there, and they can kind of insulate themselves from each other.
Yeah, if you had worked with Unreal Engine 3 in the past, you may be used to having just a few modules, maybe a dozen or maybe a little more than that. These God modules that have hundreds of classes in them. They were also tightly interconnected, or everything kind of depended on everything else. And that led to, what people call spaghetti code. It was hard to maintain and difficult to extend. Trying to find bugs in there was challenging. So for UE4, we've really tried to change this drastically. And if you look at the code base now, you will see that there are literally hundreds of modules. A lot of the big God modules that we had in the past, we split those up. And it just improves iteration times, and it makes the code cleaner. And we haven't been able to clean up all the dependencies yet. So we're now dealing with this thing that I refer to as module spaghetti, where you have too many modules depending on each other. It's kind of like spaghetti code, but one layer above. We thought it reflected a lot of the code from the past, and virtually everything that is now being added to the engine and to the editor is written in a way that is modular.
I mean, I know I'm looking at one of the questions here from the forum. It's like, part of the time is spent in UBT. UBT is basically going through your directory structure. It's looking for the star.cs files. It's basically building an assembly in C# so that it can run the C# part of it to figure out the dependency graph, right? So there's an amount of time there figuring out your dependency graph, figuring out what things to build. I don't know if there's much low-hanging fruit there these days, but I think people are actively looking at that. Unreal Header Tool, which we call UHT, I mean, that's basically parsing through all of your .h files, looking for the symbolism like uProperty and uClass, trying to figure out where your uObjects are and how to generate the reflection, which actually segs into another question that they were asking about, what is a generated.h file, which at the end of this slide, we actually have a link to, I think, a good introductory doc on like what our reflection system is. But basically, the generated.h files indicate to you, the Unreal Header Tool, that that this file has reflection information. It is a uObject or an actor or something of that nature. It's looking for uProperties. And what it's basically doing is inside of generated.h, back in UE3, we used to have .u files, which were like Unreal script things. And there was a lot of code that was basically microcode or bytecode that said, I am this kind of object. I have 5 variables. The variables' names are this. This variable is something that can be replicated. This function is something that can be called remotely. And so all of that stuff has been jammed now into generated.h, basically. And there's a couple inline files, and it goes a little bit deeper than generated.h. But the idea is that all the magic and the secret sauce, I mean, it's a little hand-wavy, but I mean, if you really want to get into it, go take a look. But I mean, it's basically all the boilerplate, all the stuff that the Unreal Engine does for you, such that serialization, like saving to disk, works, or garbage collection works, or that an RPC, like functions magically get called on a client or a server, which we're going to get into in a little bit. So Unreal Header Tool is basically parsing through that. And I think
I only have to worry about, say, like putting ufunction replicated on it, and not have to worry about all the extra.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a lot of code that goes into the fact that you just put a little macro that says, I want this to be a ufunction, right? So it's a non-zero amount of time to go through and figure all that out. I think, unfortunately, right now, like even when you haven't really changed that stuff, there's still like 5 to 10 seconds where it's kind of figuring that out. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this isn't my area of like how we're going to make it better or if we're making it better. I guess, needless to say, we have the same complaints about like we always want it to be faster. Mm-hmm. So between UBT and UHT, that's long before it even gets started compiling. If there's like a 15, 20 second delay, we want to remove that, because if you compile 20 times, 80 times a day, I mean, it all adds up, right? So we're definitely looking to improve that. And like I said, generated.h is just, at the basic level, you can think of it as like, I just do it because they tell me to. And then as you get to learn why you're putting uClass there, why you're putting uFunction there, why you're putting uProperty there, you can start to look into that. Because if you really get into like object.cpp and core script.cpp, there is just a lot of pointer math and crazy stuff that was written a long time ago that just still works thankfully, thanks Tim Sweeney, right? But we've made it better, and we've made it more extensible. I've even gone in and extended Unreal Header Tool. You can go and extend Unreal Header Tool to come up with your own custom keywords if you saw fit. But it's very powerful, and needless to say, generated.h contains that magic. And feel free to ask more specific questions on the forums, and we'll try to answer them for you.
Yeah. It's nice to be able to set one keyword and know that it's changing all the flags behind the scenes now.
There are a lot of flags.
Yeah. Yeah, the generator.h goes hand in hand with the inline files. We used to have to include those by hand, but that's no longer necessary. I think we changed that in 4.1, or the .inl files. We don't.
Yeah.
I think they're now included automatically. But basically, if you've ever written U classes in C++, then you know that you can annotate the C++ code with little macros like uClass or uStruct, and you can annotate the field members with uProperty. And those macros, they basically translate into C++ types and also code that needs to be compiled that is generated by Unreal Header Tool. And the generated.h will contain all these generated classes that were created for you, so you don't have to. And then the INL files that you no longer see, they contain all the implementation of these types and functions that were generated for you. So it's just the glue that makes everything magically work. So we get the same or similar capabilities to what other languages such as C# or Java provide out of the box.
Right. I guess there's one final question that's kind of in this domain, like talking about engine API and minimal API and why certain things are tagged or not tagged. I guess it ties into compile times as well. We've vacillated back and forth on whether or not we're supposed to expose all the functions or whether or not the easiest thing to do is for a class to just mark it as engine API or online subsystem API, which basically tells the compiler that please export every single function in this class to the DLL, as a DLL, so that everyone can use it. But we were told, and I haven't really read any research on this or what, but that if you expose it that way, the more you're exporting, the slower your compile times can be. Mm-hmm. And so to go with the minimal, export only what we want. The problem there is that we're not mind readers, or we expect the code to maybe be used a certain way and expose functions A, B, and C. But somebody, advanced users or even not advanced users, they have different ideas, and they're like, well, why didn't you expose D, E, and F? Right. So the answer is, with GitHub, I guess you can do whatever you want and go change it, or we certainly can take suggestions in the forums or with push requests or whatever that I'd really like this to be exposed. So I can't comment on anything specifically, to say this is good or this is not good. But if there's some series of functionality that you feel isn't supporting you, let us hear about it, and we can do our best to address that.
A couple forum posts or Answer Hub, I just marked this up with minimal API, and now I can see them.
Sure, the GitHub is the ultimate equalizer, right? You can just do whatever you want. Now, of course, when it comes to integrate the next build, maybe not so much. But I think we're very open to the push requests and trying to make this as big a community engine as possible, given the time constraints and the human resource constraints that we have here at Epic. So.
Yeah, and that's just part of the ongoing process of further modularizing the engine. Before I joined Epic, I've been licensee for 10 years, and I worked on a lot of small games that integrated lots of things and lots of little games. So I kind of feel the pain sometimes when it comes to extending the functionality. You look at the code and you wonder, why is this private and not protected, or why is this not virtual? And we won't be able to fix everything and all of those occurrences in the code base at once. So if there's a particular requirement that you have, just let us know, and then we'll fix it up. And besides the forums and Answer Hub, we also have there's a community IRC channel. You're free to drop by. There are about 150 game developers at any given time, so people can help each other, and there are a bunch of folks from Epic as well that can help out. As far as iteration time goes for just your game, there's one more important thing I want to bring up, and I think you're going to be really excited about it. The first thing is, a lot of people don't know that we actually have a compile button in the editor. So you can compile your game code from the editor without having to restart the editor. There are some limitations with that. It only works for code changes that don't require Unreal Header Tool to be invoked. which means you can't be adding or removing any U classes or U structs, and you can't be adding and removing or modifying any U properties. But if you just change the logic of your game without changing those types, you can just hit compile in the editor and it'll just reload and work. Starting next week, we're going to start working on a really cool new thing. It's, I think we call it Hot Reload 2.0. And that's going to be really awesome because it'll allow you to recompile your game code from Visual Studio without ever having to restart the editor. You will be able to modify U classes and U structs and U properties, and it's basically just going to work like it works right now, but without the limitations. So I think that'll greatly help iteration times, especially if you're early in your development and you have to compile 20 or 30 times a day.
Sounds awesome to me. I'm not even a programmer.
I'm just over here like,
Yeah.
We'll write the code for you and compile. So we good?
All right, let's see what else we haven't covered yet. Plugins. What's the current state of plugins? How stable is it? How do I debug plugins? I've been thinking last night about all the things I'm going to say about plugins, and then I found our awesome documentation. We're going to post a link in the end to our programming documentation on the internet. And there's an excellent page talking about plugins, and it explains everything, how you set it up, how it works, the different types of plugins you can have. Plugins right now, they are pretty stable. We are actually embracing plugins and encouraging the use of plugins in the engine. Personally, I would like to see a lot of the features that are currently just modules, especially in the editor, but also to some extent in the game framework. I would like to see those to be converted to plugins at some point. One thing that's often asked on the forums in IRC is content plugins. What's the deal if I want to have content? We still have this clause in the documentation that says, well, it kind of works, but we don't encourage it. I think it actually works pretty well. You just have to be careful. The reason we don't strongly encourage content plugins yet, or just adding content to code plugins in general, or also non-code plugins, is because you can easily maneuver yourself into a situation where your plugin will break. For example, there's currently no mechanism to ensure that your content doesn't create dependencies to other modules, like, I don't know, other plugins perhaps. And we want to make sure that plugins remain fully self-contained pieces of content and code. And that's one of the limitations where your workflow might break. So even though your plugin works on your computer, you give it to someone else, it may no longer work because accidentally you have created some dependencies to content and other plugins that people don't have on their machine.
yeah, and we do have the doc page on plugins, and we have plans to put together some tutorials going forward for those too. So hopefully that'll make it a little bit easier to set up. But I mean, we had 2 community plugins today, so obviously people are out there doing it.
And on the code side, plugins are just like modules. If you have a plugin that contains code, it'll have modules, and if you want to debug your plugin, you would debug it just like you debug regular modules. You go into Visual Studio, you set breakpoints. You can hook into the entry point of your modules, like the startup module function. Then everything goes from there.
So.
All right.
People are asking where they can find the IRC channel.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Freenode.net.
Yeah, the network is called Freenode, and the channel is called Unreal Engine.
Hashtag Unreal Engine, I guess. Well,
Yeah, hashtag Unreal Engine.
pound. I don't say hashtag. You made me say it. I don't know why I said pound Unreal Engine, because this is 1992 here, not 2014. So,
Yeah, Freenode is really popular amongst programmers.
yeah.
There are lots of channels for all kinds of programming. So
Yeah. There's a Linux one too. I think it's UE4-Linux or something like that.
Yeah.
I go in there every once in a while. Some people are obvious with their Epic prefix, there, that they're Epic employees.
And some
it's all
people-
voluntary. Like, Epic is not asking us to be there. We're just there on our own free time, trying to help answer those one-off questions that, like, how do I do this, or what's the difference between this class and this class, stuff that ideally, we'd like you to take your answers that you get from there and put them on Answer Hub. So there's some stuff there saved for posterity. But I think it's a lot faster sometimes to do a quick back and forth in IRC than it is to say the turnaround time on a forum, which some people are really fast. Some people we have tasks here to do as well, but we try to answer the questions as quickly as we can.
Yeah, there's a cool bot in that channel that you can search the docs and the API and everything
Yes,
right in there.
yes,
So-
you can. The wiki page,
Yes.
all that stuff.
Yeah, so obviously there are many more programming questions. I do have a couple more that keep showing up frequently. I'm going to go over those real quick. One of the things that especially beginners often wonder about is how does our folder structure work? How do I include things, or how do I use things from other modules? What's the deal with these underscore API macros in front of some of the classes? So if you've used UE4 before for writing code, you may have noticed that our folder structure has recently changed a little. The classes folder that was kind of inherited from previous generations of the engine has been deprecated. So you can now put your U classes and your U structs into any other folder in your module, into public or private or even at the root. And it's just going to work. As a result of that, the special file called mymoduleclasses.h has also been removed. So if you no longer use the classes folder, UHT won't be generating that header file anymore. So you don't have to include that anywhere.
But it does if you still have classes.h
If
for
you-
legacy reasons, right?
Yeah, for legacy reasons, it still does that. And you will notice that some of our sample games still use the old way of structuring the folder layout. All our templates have already been updated, so they do the right thing now. And we encourage you to do the same.
I think we covered a lot of the API stuff with
Yeah.
before with the
Exporting DLLs.
including and exporting DLLs.
Yeah. So if you run into a problem where you're trying to use a class from another module, and then either it can't find that class when it compiles, or perhaps it's telling you that there are missing symbols during the linker stage when you build your game. That usually means that you either forgot to include the right header file that declares the types you want to use, or you may have forgotten to add a module dependency to your build.cs file. The build.cs file for each of your modules tells UBT where it can find other things such as header files and libraries that were compiled previously. So if you use anything from any other modules, then you have to add a dependency, and then it'll just find it. Yeah. All right, I think we made it through it.
Well, good. All right. So, this was supposed to be an intro to programming talk. We looked a lot at the forum, the questions you guys posted on that thread, asking questions about, like, say, gameplay programming or general programming questions. I'd like to do a Twitch stream in the future about, like, network programming in general, but there were definitely a lot of questions about how do I set up a dedicated server, or what does network replication mean, or I want to be a server, I want to be standalone. So we definitely have docs incoming. I've actually been working with Lauren and Jeff, our tech writers, to basically just expound the tomes of onlineness to them. They're busy making outlines for what we've talked about, and hopefully you're going to do a first pass. We're going to put them online as they come available. We're not just going to wait and dump them all at once.
We have some replication that has been
Yes.
coming online in the past couple months.
Yeah, I did a quick little pass at the end of this. At the end of this stream, we have a bunch of links to blog posts that hopefully talk about networking stuff that maybe you've seen or maybe you have not. Billy Bramer, give a big shout out to him. He put a lot. Like, I gave him some stuff, but he's been really taking the ball and running and doing a lot of network replication tutorials and videos. And he's like dedicated to this one forum thread that people are just bombarding him with questions. So all of these posts are going to be at the end of this stream. And we hope that you'll take a look at those to kind of familiarize yourself with the basic topics. Don't worry, it's a lot of information. There's a lot of stuff going on. Even for as much as the engine does for you automatically, it's obviously good to understand when it does it and why it does it, because you don't want to be sending megabytes of data a second to your clients. You're going to run into lag problems. You're going to run into maybe Time Warner's going to get mad at you for using gigabytes of bandwidth. I don't know, but anyway, so back to the actual questions and stuff. I just thought I'd take a high-level approach to what people have asked. And so starting off with like some of the building blocks that are related to, say, multiplayer. Well, they're based on any kind of programming, but you have your game mode. The game mode is kind of the heart of your game. It's where basically game rules are going to start. It's where, like, when do we start the game? Who's winning the game? When is the game over? It usually tells people when they can join or when they can't join the game. In matchmaking, there's some state there, like pre-round, post-round, end of match kind of stuff. The game mode is only on the server, so it's one way to kind of check off the world. You can say, get me the game mode, and if the mode is null, then you know you're a client, because only the server will have one of these. On the other hand is its buddy, the game state. The game state is meant to be instead of having everything on the game mode and replicating that to everyone, a long time ago we came up with the game state, and the game state is basically things like maybe a timer or a score or some things that you want the clients to know so that they can make independent decisions or authoritative decisions, as part of gameplay. So the game state is meant to be a replicated object. Most things on there are replicated. There's certainly functions and functionality on there. The UI tends to interact with the game state a lot to be able to show, like I said, HUD, timers, what the score is, et cetera, like that. So the game state's really your main replication object as far as the game is concerned. Then you have player controller. Player controller, you can go on and on about what it is and what it does. Obviously, it's mostly the manifestation of you. You could say, well, the pawn is that, but not really, because you might get in a vehicle and you switch from the player to, the human to the vehicle, or you might be dead, and so then you don't have a pawn. So the player controller really represents or embodies like the person, right? And underneath that, there's like the network connection and some other stuff that goes on to that. But the idea is that the server has a player controller for every single player in the game. And so when you're doing things, you can't just assume that if you iterate over all the player controllers, you're going to get your player controller. So there's certain things you have to be looking for. You have to check, is this the guy specifically I'm looking for? Now on the clients, only the player controller that you own is on the client. So you can kind of be safe that if you're calling this function and you're on a client, that it's yours. There are checks like, am I the local player controller, that kind of guarantee that. That's mostly to disambiguate on a listen server. Like if you happen to also be the server, that like this, of the 9 player controllers that are in here, this one is local, this one is either me or my split screen buddy. Split screen's a whole other topic onto itself, so I won't even go into that. But player controllers are also the heart of what allow for replication. Like any actor can call a remote procedure call, which is like calling a function remotely. But if you don't have a player controller in the owner chain, which is like when you spawn an actor, you say that my parent or my owner is a player controller, or an actor whose parent. If you can't go up the hierarchy and end with a player controller, then all the ufunction client reliable, server reliable stuff is not going to work. And so you just basically have to know that somewhere you have to parent your actor to a player controller such that when you call an exec function or a RPC function or whatever, it's going to go up the chain, it's going to get the player controller from that, figure out the network connection that's involved here, and send the data out. On the other hand, you have the player state. The player state, much like the game state, is the thing we intend for everyone to see about you. So things like maybe your health, maybe the number of bullets you have, if that was important for other clients to know. The idea is that there's one player state per player.
Like your name, stuff like that.
Yeah, sorry, the more obvious things, like your name, right? So that you can show above your head or on the scoreboard. So when you're looking at, like on a client and you're looking at the UI, you're going to iterate over the player state, because that's kind of the de facto way to, like, who's in the game right now. If there's a player state, that means the person's in the game and it's been replicated across. There are some caveats at the beginning when someone's just joining that you got to get this data across to everybody. But for the most part, the array is up to date and accurate. It is showing the end players that are in the game. So those are kind of building blocks related to networking. Replication, there's a good doc already about replication. That's basically if you mark up your variables, there's at least 2 ways you can do that. One is just like a passive replication, which just says this variable is replicated. I like to think of health as a good example of that. Somebody might be showing a health bar for other players. If the value's 99 right now and it's 98 in a second, you don't really care. You just want to know that you're displaying some value, and if it's accurate to within a second or within your latency, it doesn't really matter. because you're not, as a client, you don't really care if he's dead or not. The server will tell you eventually, and that'll be okay. The second way is like using rep notifies. And rep notifies are basically you're marking up an already replicated variable as when this variable changes, please let me know, right? So what basically happens there is something like we used it in, like for bullets, let's say, like on the server when you shoot a gun, we increment a value, like we called it bullet count or flash count in UT. And we just knew that when this value changed, we got a function call on all the clients to say that somebody fired a bullet. And you might do things like play a particle effect, or you might play a sound. So it's more of an event-driven replication thing. It's like, I've changed, what do you want to do about it? Right? So that's what rep notifies are. And then the third means of replication is the remote procedure calls. They're the greediest, most heavy-handed way to kind of get your point across to the client. And that's basically saying, right now, interrupt everything you're doing, send a packet. I want to tell this client something's happened, right? Try to be careful with the number of parameters you pass, because you're basically making a network packet here. And if you have an array of 5,000 things that you want to communicate, that's going to take a long time. So you really, you want it to be lightweight. You want to be aware of what an RPC is doing. Sending across, ints and floats and strings, that's okay. Data structure, larger data structures are okay too. Just kind of, you got to temper it with the frequency of what you're trying to do and what you're trying to convey. Maybe there's a better way. So RPCs, again, must be tied to a player controller. The actor, like an inventory or a pawn, those typically are parented to a player controller. So in some way, so you can find your way up there and be able to call those RPCs. I'm going to skip some of this stuff just in the interest of time, and we're going to, like net drivers and net connections, those are lower level concepts that we're definitely going to have some docs on. Yeah. People are asking a lot about server travel, like how do I go from a menu where I pick, start a single player game versus start a multiplayer game. So there's several kinds of server travel, but they all kind of, as the server, they hinge around the function server travel. And that's on the world, and it takes an URL or a string that usually is conveyed in the form map name, question, key value pair, question, key value pair. So question listen being the optimal one for doing networking. If you say map name, question listen with a server travel, that client or that instance of the game is going to go to the next world, and it's going to start hosting and listening for connections. So basically, my map, question listen is like the basic thing that you can do. I think Billy's stuff addresses some of these things. So now the question is, how do you want to travel? There's two ways typically. One is I call hard travel, the other is seamless travel. Typically something that begins and ends a game is called hard travel. Like you're not connected to anybody right now. You want to become a server. You call server travel. You go to a new map with a new game mode, and you've hard traveled there. Like if there was anyone connected to you prior, they've been disconnected. Everything you were doing previously is kind of thrown away, and now you're in the game. Now that you're in the game, you're listening for clients. Clients are joined. Let's say the match is ended, but you want a map cycle, right? You're playing a team deathmatch, something. You go from map A to map B. You should usually seamless travel. Now, seamless travel is still server travel, but there's a Boolean on your game mode called BU seamless travel that, if it's true, it will seamlessly travel. And what does that mean? It means that it's going to seamlessly and gracefully keep all the connections alive in the game rather than drop them. And it's going to basically travel to this intermediate map that's like usually a low memory footprint thing, so we can garbage collect the old map. And then it's going to transition to your next map. All the while, all your network's connections are open, all the actors and objects are ticking. So it basically allows you to do whatever you want. I mean, the example I've always used, which we've never implemented, is I think of it like the Assassin's Creed Animus. Like you can kind of walk around. You literally could have pawns and guys doing stuff if you wanted. Like in Gears 3, which of course is like UE3, we use seamless travel, and that's where we showed like the embers and stuff while we had the scoreboard. The voice chat was still on, you were still connected, everyone was still in your game. In UT3, you could map vote, right? You could game vote. So you were able to do things even though under the hood we're actually unloading a level and reloading a level. So seamless travel is kind of the way to go. You could actually carry actors over from one level to another. I'll get to the Game King, which was a question in a second. But typically, we don't carry a lot of actors over, but the game mode will stay around for a little while. The game state will stay over, just so that we can do things like keep the scoreboard open and not throw it away. I mean, seamless travel is a complicated topic. I hope to be able to address it more in a doc, in a forum post, ask some questions on AnswerHub. I'm happy to answer them to the best of my abilities. Now, there are other two ways to travel. One is set client travel, and the other is client travel. Set client travel is on the world, And it really is like, I'm just a client and I want to go somewhere else. Like if I'm in a menu and I want to join my friend's game, you might travel to them. You're not trying to be a server. There aren't many options, like the URL still exists, but you're not really becoming a server. So you're just kind of, mostly it's like an IP address or some other thing like that. Maybe you're putting on some values to tell the server, I want to be, my player name is X, or I'd like to be on team 2. The server doesn't have to listen to you, of course, but that's how you might communicate stuff like that. Client travel is the same idea. Server travel actually uses client travel to tell existing clients, hey, we're traveling, but you can call it on your own, and in fact, it's probably the more preferred way to do it because it is extensible on the player controller, whereas the set client travel is on the world, and we don't typically derive from world to do anything. So that covers like seamless travel, server travel. I know these, I'm only scratching the surface here. I'm trying to be kind of quick. So that talks, like I also like to embrace all of that under the air quotes of Unreal networking. Like that's the stuff you get for free. It's what Unreal does really well. Then we have the online subsystem, which really is a sibling to Unreal networking. Online subsystem is meant to be the bookkeeping and the session management that goes on with platform-specific stuff. We're talking about Live, Steam, PlayStation Network, something else that someone else has written out there that is like, I want to be hosted by these platform services. So it covers things like cloud storage, leaderboards, achievements. Session management is really like matchmaking, right? It's like I'm advertising my game out there. I'm trying to find a game out there. This is the stuff, actually, the docs for this are going to come hopefully first, session management. So you don't need it. You can actually travel with question listen, and you can open IP, you can call set client travel with 127.0.0.1, like for localhost, and you can get all your matchmaking and your networking and your gameplay working without touching online subsystem at all. So, take heed. Like obviously on the PC platforms like Windows, Mac, Linux, we're talking about Steam for the most part. That's what Epic supports. I mean, GameSpy's gone. Live and PSN are console-specific things. So for now, if you're familiar with Steam, again, I'm happy to answer questions about that. We do have something called Online Subsystem Null, which is basically like a no-op system so that your code doesn't have to be written differently. If you don't want to include Online Subsystem, you can still call these functions. They do the bare minimum of stuff. They call the delegates that they're supposed to call. And so your game flow can continue without having to if-def, like if I'm using online subsystems or if I'm not using online subsystems.
Got a quick question for you,
Sure.
Josh. So you mentioned a few concepts like a game mode and player controller and pawn and stuff like that. And those are all things that I know you can do pretty well in Blueprints without any coding at all. How much of the server travel and replication stuff can actually be done in Blueprints? Or is that unknown at
the
this point?
kryptonite. So Blueprints are not very friendly. Online subsystem and travel are not very friendly with Blueprints, and that is, we are sorry. We have that on our it's in our roadmap. Something we're trying to address. We're well aware that there are plenty of people that want to write codeless or blueprint-only games and be able to travel. Our game framework team it's on their schedule. Right now, they're working on the Game King. I don't like that name. It's going to be called the Game Instance, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But the Game Instance is being worked on by our framework team, and once that's done, my understanding is that making Blueprints more aware of online stuff is their goal. Now, obviously, Tappy Chicken has actually exposed a lot of stuff related to leaderboards and achievements through Blueprints, but when I first worked on the online subsystem, my goal was to keep it mostly native, and I didn't want to expose everything because there's a lot of things that in Blueprints I envisioned we can get, like these 10 function calls can be one Blueprint node, or we want to make it simpler there. So I didn't just want to say, vomit online subsystem to the Blueprints and say, have at it. I was hoping that we could kind of revisit it and say, this is how these pieces work, and you can think about it at a higher level, like join a game, or find a friend, or post my leaderboard.
Super function kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe that's folly. Maybe we won't be successful with that, but that's the goal, right? The goal is to make Blueprints the easier way, because we're going to get, I don't want to say Blueprints are the casual way to do things, because they're obviously very powerful and all that stuff, but the point is there are people that may want to dip into the shallow end and just try some basic things, and we want that to be Blueprints for them. So it's coming. I don't have a date for it. It's on the roadmap. Vote away on the roadmap on Trello that like this is important. We already know it's important, so we're actively trying to do that. Awesome. Dedicated servers is again like these are all huge topics that we could talk for hours on. Dedicated servers I think right now are not well supported in like the blueprint only path also. Common theme here. It's not all my fault. But like people seem to be thinking that dedicated servers are really important. I would say focus on getting your listen server working, getting a handle around network functionality in a client and client talking together way. Dedicated servers are basically just listen servers without a player on them. They require a little bit extra work to be idle and be listening for players, and what do you do when the first player joins versus what do you do when the last player leaves. There's a whole bunch of state that you may, depending on how advanced your project is or what you're trying to do as a hobbyist or not, you may not want to bother yourself with these kind of things. But dedicated servers ultimately add a lot of optimizations, a lot of code we don't have to run, particle systems, sounds, things like that. There's a lot of content we don't have to have in memory, like various vertex buffers and particle systems and textures and audio cues and things like that. So like in Gears, we were talking orders of magnitude difference in the size of, like Gears of War 3 barely fit on a DVD, but the dedicated servers that were running behind them were like, it was a 50 meg executable or 25 meg executable with like 300 megs of content. So they are definitely lean and mean versions of listen servers. There's a lot of caveats about that. We'll try to get some links about how they work. In the meantime, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have, like specific questions on the forums about that. But the editor, like you can actually run with dash server, and it will put it in server mode. You run with dash game, it'll put it in game mode. It'll pretend, like, so the editor is very schizophrenic.
You can even test in Pi with the use
Yes, and so
server.
Pi is, again, another topic onto itself. We've exposed being able to like click play and run within one process, run multiple clients and a dedicated server. So you can certainly test it there. Obviously, none of the optimizations are there because you're using all the content in editor mode, but you can at least simulate it. And I'd like to think that listen servers and dedicated servers aren't that much different functionally. They're mostly different when it comes to optimizations and ticking and certain things you don't have to do. So it's like dedicated servers are a subset of listen servers. They're not like mutually exclusive concepts. So if you get listen servers, you'll get dedicated servers. Like things, there were questions about advertising. How do I put a dedicated server out on the interwebs? And the answer is the same way you do a listen server. You have to use the session API and advertise with Steam or advertise with some other third-party provider to do a master server system. You have to find the session, then you have to join the session. You can invite people to a session. And again, docs are incoming.
Yeah.
I'm sorry they're not there already. That's basically it. The game, I promised the Game King. The idea in UE3 was that, we didn't have a good way, and up until now we still don't really have a good way of how do I keep an object around longer than, say, one game mode. And because of garbage collection and the way things worked, you usually had to like add to root, and then which made it so it couldn't garbage collect, and then find it on the other side through t-object iterator, which could be slow. It's a lot faster now. But we really wanted to come up with an object. What kind of actor or U-object can we put into the game that transcends everything? It's like, it's the master watchdog. It is the thing that's always around you. A singleton, you can always get it. So this is the game instance. And the game instance will be a place that you can hang persistent items so that, you want to keep something around from map cycle to map cycle, dangle it from the game instance. The more important, so that's a convenience thing. The most important thing I think the game instance will buy us is the watchdog aspect of it. Like, there are a lot of delegates in the engine. Like, I've logged in, I've logged out. We've had an I/O error. We've had a network failure. We've had things that we've, at various times and through various learnings, we've made better. They used to be on the player controller, but the player controller could get garbage collected. And then you were without, these were rare bugs, like shipping type bugs. But it's like, what do? I don't have a player controller, and I need to get back to the main menu. So the game instance is meant to kind of be this watchdog that's like, I know that I'm in the middle of playing a match, and I've gotten a delegate that says, online subsystem tells me my Ethernet cable's been pulled. I want to get you back to the main menu. So it's going to hijack whatever's going on, and it's going to pull you back and throw you back into the main menu gracefully. Because what also used to happen is there'd be a function, return to main menu, and if you pressed it in the UI, it would call it. But if you got a network error, it would call it. Or if you got this I/O error, you would call it. And so typically, one of the bugs the QA would find is they would happily pull your Ethernet cable from the other side of the router. So the system thought it was connected, but you weren't connected to the online world. And so everything would start failing, but it was still timing out. So you have 45 seconds where nothing's happening. And then all of a sudden, you've been logged out, you've been disconnected from live, you've been, you have no connection to the dedicated server. And so everybody would call return to main menu at the same time. So now you have this reentrant code where you're basically calling the same functions from 8 different locations.
Right.
and it's like crash, or I don't know, it just got really bad and really gnarly and nasty. So the idea is that the game instance is going to watch over this. It's going to be the one thing that's paying attention to this thing. It can't be garbage collected. It's not going to go away. And it's going to save you, and it's...
This 8 function calls it.
Flowers and butterflies, dogs and cats living together, it's going to solve all those problems.
Can
And
I customize it? Can I substitute it with my own?
ideally, it's going to be like, I believe the idea is that there's going to be an engine version of it, and then you'll write, shooter game. Like right now, it's called Game King, and it's in the shooter game. It was kind of a prototype. Let's feel it out, see what it's good at. We're going to bring the good parts into the engine. Shooter Game is going to be able to derive from it and do custom things. I mean, because everybody's going to have custom logic. Like, if I'm in the game and I get disconnected, do I always go to the main menu? Maybe not. If it's a co-op single-player game, maybe you carry. If you're the host, you can carry on. I don't know. It depends. There's a lot of what-ifs, right? So the idea is that it will be extensible by the game. It will be pretty much guaranteed to always be there and accessible, and it will solve, I hope, a lot of these problems. Now, what problems we try to solve, I think are going to go, okay, we're going to start small, handle things like logins and disconnects and stuff like that. And then as we hit other harder bugs, we'll say, can the game instance solve this problem? And we'll refactor code as we go on. So I hope that covers most everything people ask. And I guess we'll get on to questions if we haven't completely run through our time.
Have we went through our time?
Okay,
Okay, I'll have to make them good then. Well,
the best questions.
this isn't a question, but Ryan, unfortunately, you're relegated to be here forever. I want you here every week, either that or they need to change you to the desk, so you can't leave. Let's see, and they want to know, let me highlight this so I can see who asked, I can't read the name, is, will you release Ryan's work as a on the marketplace as downloads with some docs? And can you make this a sample level?
So actually, it's already in the main engine content directory under a folder called Art Tools, sorry. And so in 4.3, it should just be out to everybody. The one part of it that won't be there is the semi-procedural material part. And that's actually a separate content project called semi-procedural, for lack of a better name right now. But that one is not planned yet, but I would expect maybe 4.3 or 4, or sorry, 4.4, maybe 5. It could make it out. It just needs to be cleaned up and well commented, essentially. But yeah, that one should be going out next version for you guys.
Everybody was asking about tutorials, so I'll continue with that for this one. Lauren, could you make a tutorial to show how to replace template stuff with finished meshes? It would help a lot of indie devs who are starting or still learning the ropes.
So do you know to go through it? So one thing I was thinking of, we've got the content example project, and one of the maps in there is the level design, and they actually show going through 4 stages for everything from like the prototyping stage of level design all the way through like the final lighting and particles, effects pass. And we've been doing doc passes over the content examples to sort of show people what's there, but that's one of the ones that we've planned to do a deeper dive on later on. So maybe that could be something that's part of that.
Great. And Josh, networking is so broad and complex.
No.
Forever.
No.
It's not a question, it's just an
He
observation.
also asked, are you going to be writing some tutorials and docs and stuff like that? And you pretty much answered.
Yeah, I mean, the goal is, like, I'm trying to bide my time between working on Fortnite and helping out with the engine, being on the IRC channels, answering forum stuff. I basically, in the last 2 months, I've spent several hours talking to Lauren and Jeff. They've recorded me lecturing, I guess, on online topics. So I was kind of new to, like, how we wanted to have a consistent look and feel to our documentation system. So I basically expounded upon them at great length, what I thought was important about these topics. They're diligently hard at work amongst all the other documentation work that they're doing to come up with an outline and probably more. Like, I was just going to figure out how I met them in the middle, right? Because I could start writing docs from the beginning, but that's really hard and there's a lot of time involved. I was trying to leverage their usefulness and their experience in writing docs. So they're going to kind of come this way with what I've initially told them, and I'm going to come this way with expanding upon that.
Yeah, answers to all of our questions.
And, fact checking and accuracy checking, and then adding more detail where because they can't know the whole engine, and then hopefully we'll come up with something that's worthwhile and useful in the documentation structure. But like I said, the Billy's tutorials and the stuff we're going to show at the end of this stream are already great starts, and in the meantime, I'm providing or trying to provide as much of my time as possible on the forums and in Answer Hub and UDN to answer specific questions. I think I've been successful so far. People seem to like my answers so far, I hope. And so just keep them coming. And our community portal guys or community support guys will get the questions to me, and I'll do my best to answer them.
And they couldn't hear me ask your question, so if you could just let everybody know that I was asking if you guys
Oh.
are all going to continue to do tutorials.
I forgot, yes. Is there documentation coming, and are we going to have more information? Yes, that was the answer to that question.
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
All right.